Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Champlain, and I want to thank you for being here in our seminar today. My presentation is called How to Survive Grief. So there are a few individuals here that were not here this morning. So if everyone doesn't mind, I'm going to reintroduce myself, who I am, and why I'm here in front of you right now. So again, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I'm actually the author of a now international best-selling book, this one, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And in a nutshell of why I'm here and why I did all this is, and the brief overview is I was someone who was very, very scared of dying. It happened back in 1996 that a tremendous fear just came over me. Who am I? What is my life for? Looking up at the stars and not being able to handle why I've suffered so much. And you know, as human beings, very often the same junk keeps showing up in our life and the same painful things. And I think I was going through a string of painful relationships. My boyfriend had dumped me for my best friend, and that actually happened a couple of times with a couple different gentlemen. So life wasn't so great, and I went on this expedition if I could find some meaning of who I am, what my life is for, and to get rid of this pain and fear of dying. So over the course of about 15 years, very secretly, I looked for evidence of the afterlife. Started with church and religion, and then I turned to the world that I would always laugh at, that I knew didn't exist, which was the spiritual world. And I've studied mediumship with the great Doreen Virtue. I've studied something called remote viewing, which is an ESP technique with the physicist Russell Targ. I've gone deep into the worlds of near-death experiences, even studying with Ken Ring, who's someone who taught about the near-death experiences of blind people who, for the very first time when they flatlined, had vision. There is Dr. Alan Botkin, who is a psychologist, I believe, and he worked with the VA hospital, helping veterans who had post-traumatic stress disorder. And wasn't into the afterlife thing, but there's something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprogramming. And it's a series of eye movements that he would administer to people suffering this great trauma. And somehow, and I don't know how it all works, by doing this, the memory would get dislodged from the emotion, and so the terrible suffering didn't have to happen. Well, after a series of one too many left, rights, people got transported into this other world, a world where they could see Dr. Botkin's deceased relatives, that it was just like an opening to the afterlife. And so he started playing around with it. A few more veterans came in and gave a little extra, not harmful. And all to say, now he has, I think, 71 practitioners around the world, and he's created something called induced after-death communication. And it's just a phenomenal field. There's so many people that never believed in life after death, only to meet enough people, hear enough stories, do their own research that life after death is real. So there's a bunch of things, and for me, my fear was rested. Never was I someone who ever dreamed of writing a book, though, or talking about it, because again, people were crazy that talked this kind of thing. And in 2010, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and I relocated from Massachusetts to Florida to be by his side. And over those 5 months, I fell in love with my dad for the person he was, and it was a very difficult time. And in the time before my dad passed away, I started having these tremendous struggles with my siblings. And of course, we all love Dad, right? We love people and we want to do the best for them. But the series of miscommunications about how to care for Dad started happening. And I started being told, well, Sandra says this and this and this. And I thought, geez, I've never said that. And so with 3 siblings, somehow I became the bad guy. It became about Sandra and her personal wishes and some personal agenda Sandra had. and not about Dad and their reality. And of course, they lived far away, and I was the only one by his side that was hearing his words, and I thought, it was awful. So Dad died on May 11th, 2010, and at the same time, the relationships with my siblings died. And it went on to, I don't want to say we fought over his belongings, because at that point, I walked away. I said, you guys deal with it. If you want to put a box aside for me, that's fine. And in my world, I would have never changed those 5 months with my dad for any object that could have been left over. And I hit an all-time low of pain. I had experienced grief from the loss of my grandmother 3 years before my dad died. And that was horrible. I was very, very close to Grammy. Horrible. And where I went emotionally and physically, because we all know the physical parts of grief as well, was so awful that I don't want to say that I was going to commit suicide, but I could understand why people feeling that low would think that that's their only way out. So I'm usually this upbeat, happy person, always saying something silly, want to put a smile on your face, or, one of my favorite tricks is asking you what you love about your life. And when people talk about what they love, they feel good, I feel good. So I'm that kind of person. So for me to be in that state, it just wasn't a match. And somehow it was almost as if a little voice came into my head and said, this is all part of grief, like all of it. And so I must have read maybe 18 books on grief. I looked online, everything I could find about grief, I wanted to know. And it was all very similar things that we know about the grieving process, what we can expect. We can go into a state of shock, we can feel numb, we can have anger, we can have guilt, there's a whole world attributed to grief. But I wanted to know, is there something about grief that would turn a loving family into such monsters? Now, I don't want to say that it's just my siblings, because, there was actually a moment that I got so mad at my sister, and the stuff that was coming out of my mouth was pretty bad. And so I was just as bad. And I kept digging and digging, because I was going to find an answer. And a statistic that I found that really I knew that I was pointed in the right direction is about 45% of sibling relationships come apart when a parent dies. That's quite a bit. I had gone to a dinner, and there were 8 of us sitting at the table, and 5 of the 8 of us were not talking to a brother or sister after our parent died. That was an aha moment. There are 80% of parents that get divorced if they lose a child. It's a big number when you're supposed to support each other. There's 90% of couples that get divorced if one of them gets diagnosed with a terminal illness. And there's over 1 million grief-related suicides a year. So something is clearly wrong, and I knew I had to keep digging. And lo and behold, I found an article written on the internet, and then another one, and then another one, because once you start finding something, it's like, oh, what else is there? And it's the brain's reaction to grief. We all know that our body operates on different chemicals, and how our body really works, I don't think anybody truly knows all of it. But one thing I'd always heard is, even when Dad was dying, we needed to do things to raise his endorphins, so I brought in Carol Burnett videos, and we watched movies and had music and things like that. So I knew endorphins would make us feel good. So when I started reading about neurotransmitters and their place in the brain during grief, some of this kind of made sense. We actually lose. If we have, say, 100% active brain chemistry. And I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I can't give you exactly how it all works, but this, from a layman's terms, is the best I can do because I know it makes a difference. A healthy brain, just say, has 100% functioning neurotransmitters. A grieving brain could have 20%, 10%, even less. And these neurotransmitters, we know we get incredibly sad while we're grieving. We know that there's that shock and can feel numb, kind of the disbelief. There can be tremendous anger. I saw a demon come out of me that I didn't even know was in there. But without enough of these healthy chemicals in our brain, that's what shows up. There's many people that can't sleep while they're grieving because these neurotransmitters control our sleep cycles. And then there's some of us that all we wanted to do was be alone and sleep, or try to sleep. But the biggest aha came to me when I found out that these neurotransmitters control our, not just our mood, but our memory and our perception and our communication abilities. We've heard often that grieving people can't find their keys when they come home from work. Or, did I already have this conversation with you? I can't remember. My mom's got a good friend whose husband had just left her, just devastated her, and they're going to get divorced. And the woman called my mom the other day, and she starts telling her the story of the latest thing that happened. And my mom says, "You just called me yesterday and told me all of that." And this woman, and she's a professional, has absolutely zero memory of having that conversation with my mom. Perception is how we see the occurring world. To have, say, there's a car accident, and we hear this all the time. The police question two innocent bystanders, and they have a similar story, but it's not exactly the same. See, I think our brains are so busy picking up so many different bits of information, like we can't possibly get it all in. And that's a healthy brain. Well, a grieving brain, we could be having a conversation, and Judy, I meet you, and I think you're great, and you're wonderful. And then, you're wearing blue that matches my blue. But then after, I remember you with no glasses, brown hair, wearing a red dress as reality. It's all part of grief. And even communication, things we think we're saying out loud, we might not be. Case in point, my sister and I had a conversation about Dad's care. And it's one of those conversations I remember exactly where I was, exactly what I said. I was in Atlanta airport, changing airplanes, and it was a question about moving Dad to another care facility. And she says, "Sandra, so you're saying this, this, and this." I said, "No, that's not what I've been saying at all. I'm saying this, this, and this." And 3 times we went back and forth until finally I said, "Heidi, repeat to me, God bless you, what it was that I said." And finally she got out my words correctly, because I knew she was going to tell my siblings what I had said. Well, guess which story she told them? This one, the wrong one. And again, that fueled the fire of Sandra's greedy, Sandra's out for herself, things like that. At the time, I thought my sister was out to get me, and my siblings were. But in truth, it's part of the grieving process. She didn't retain the information I had told her, and what she did retain, she really believed it was the truth. That was my biggest aha moment that actually had me start taking action, because it gave me understanding for myself of why this happened. And although it didn't mend my family, I thought, if people knew this, it really might make a difference. And so me, just being me, created an audio called How to Survive Grief. Everything I knew about grief, I just wanted to give away. And I bought the domain name, survivegrief.com, and you can still go there and press the play button. And at the time, I had a place, if you wanted to download it, just put in your name and your country. I thought that would be cool, because, what do I know about marketing? And just to see what happened. And so I made about 5 posts on Facebook, just to my friends. And in a matter of just a few months after Dad died, over 3,000 people in 15 countries had heard it. And people started reporting that it eased their pain, it gave them hope. Siblings would listen to it around the time of a parent's death. They worked through a death together as opposed to coming apart. And the biggest thing that happened that in turn led into writing a book is I got reports of, I chose not to commit suicide because of your words. Yeah, wow is right. To have a man look me in the eye, a man, professional man, and say that he was on the verge of suicide, but when he listened to my words, he realized everything he was feeling was a part of grief. All these thoughts that go through our heads, and there's so much we'll get into shortly about some of the symptoms, and if you call them symptoms, of grief. So with that information, I knew without a doubt I needed to get this out to as many people as possible. How does one do that? The average human being has no idea they're grieving. No idea. It's not just when we lose a loved one or a pet. It's when something in our life changes. We lose a job, we lose our health, we lose a relationship. We get diagnosed with an illness. Our financial situation changes, or we lose a job. I don't know if I mentioned that. All of that. And so why do we have to grieve? And one of the things I tell people, because in our society today, it's pretty normal that we don't see a lot of death. Our elders, they're in a hospital, hospice, nursing homes, things like that. It's rare that people have their elders in the home to die, like used to happen. Death can come as a shock to us, like out of the blue. And maybe you get a week off from work, a couple weeks off. People who have never grieved say, aren't you over it yet? There's a couple of things that really tick me off is people saying things like, when Grammy died, she was 1 week short of her 91st birthday. Well, she lived a good life, good long life. It's like, I wanted to wrap my hands around them, It wasn't her time. Or God needed another angel in heaven. Things like that. I always say, it doesn't even matter if you've experienced grief or not. You don't know what somebody's feeling. So to even just say, I'm here for you, and I don't know exactly how you're feeling, but I'm here for you, and if there's anything I can do, or if you need someone to talk to. It's often that we lose some of our friends while we're grieving, or people we're close to. And I don't think it's because they mean to be mean, but they've never been there and they don't know what to say. Excuse me 1 second. They don't know what to say. So it can be a human reaction to just disappear. When we grieve, this might be a really poor comparison, but to talk about having compassion for someone who is grieving. If you can imagine someone who's got maybe a drug or alcohol dependency, and they are hooked, and all of a sudden you take it away, what's left? That person is not pleasant to be around, is going through a very painful experience. Who knows what it feels like internally? But would you trust a secret to them, or give them your money, or make real strong decisions about something with this person? Probably not, because their mind is not right. I really want everyone to get, when we're grieving, our mind is not right. It takes time for our brain to, whatever it does, and these good chemicals start coming back. And there's some tools to get us there. So to have compassion for people is ultra important. I heard once that grief is necessary for the survival of species. And I thought, well, because you think, why does it have to hurt so bad? Why does it have to hurt so bad? And the survival of the species, the way, and it makes sense. It was an example of a bear cub that loses its mother. And the grief is true for animals and for human beings. Without grief, that animal could go on like happy-go-lucky, waiting for mom to come feed it, save the day, provide shelter, whatever bears do. But instead, grief is like a wake-up call. It's a shock to the system. Something's changed. You need to reassess your own life and how you're going to proceed. So without grief, or with grief, that bear cub gets a wake-up call to now it's on its own. And it has to survive in a different way than before. I have this picture of like a thermometer, but I call it the loveometer. And why I talk about this is grief can be extremely painful when you lose someone close to you. And it's not so painful if you don't know the person, or, truthfully, we may not care because, well, I didn't know them. From everything I know about life after death, I have this very strong belief that we come to life, planet Earth, whatever, to experience the highs, the lows, to learn, to grow as a soul. I think there really is a purpose for us being here. And one of the strongest things is our ability to love. And I believe this loveometer measures the degree to which we love. And unfortunately, the amount of pain we feel really is in direct correlation to how much we love. So if this empowers you, it may sound silly, but I think we get brownie points as human beings the more we love. So grief might just be an indication that you're on the right track by really loving. So I made some notes because I don't want to forget anything, because there's a lot to discuss around grief. There is something before one dies. If, like my dad was diagnosed with cancer and we knew it was inevitable he'd die, but it's called anticipatory grief. Grief can kick in anytime we're threatened with life might be different or that there might be a loss. It's important to know because you or somebody around you, these anger stages might come through, or whatever may happen may show up much earlier than to be expected. So very, very important to have compassion. Mega compassion for yourself, for others. There's no turning grief off, looking at the date on the calendar and saying I should be over with it by now. It takes time. How much time? Who knows? All brains are different. I've been asked a lot about the different, going to a doctor and getting medication for grief. So I'm no doctor, by the way, and I think anytime you're in question, it's important to see your physician. Because and again, this is Sandra layman's terms talking about our grief levels. But say our brain is only functioning with 20% of all these healthy chemicals, and it takes time to bring them back and go through grief to release it, to be well adjusted to our new situation without the person. There are people that experience really extreme grief. Those levels that I was talking about, maybe suicidal, maybe not seeing their way out, whatever that may be. So I always encourage people, if you have any question, see your doctor. I do know that the only way to get through grief is to go through grief. And it hurts. But I also know that there are some tools and techniques that we can use to actually speed up the process, make it less painful, be in an environment where the brain can start healing a bit quicker. And are there times that you're living life, you seem like you're okay, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the tears will come. My day job is I'm a chef, and I cook for race car teams, so I travel. And I remember after Grammy died, I was in Canada cooking, and I had this big vat of scrambled eggs that I was cooking. And I really thought, well, I'm having a good day. And without warning, without even thinking of my grandmother, I just remember bursting into tears that I just buckled over in pain, and I couldn't stop crying. And of course, the eggs are burning, and I lost all physical control. And what's normal to think is like, I should be able to pull myself out of this. But that's not how grief works, sorry to say. So one of the main undertones of this is really to have compassion. Okay, so I said that. Okay, so impacts of grief. Many of these you've heard before. They might serve as a good reminders, and some of them you might say, really? That's part of it? And this is not the full list, because I'm sure with each individual, things are different. We experience physical pain. We could have back pain. We could have our belly aches. We could just be sore and achy. That depression, sadness, crying. It's been said that the tears coming from a grieving person are of a different chemical makeup than our normal tears. And what that tells me is that there actually is some release process that must be going on for that to happen. Anger, often rage. I mean, really being ticked off, bad. Who are you angry at? Well, we can be angry at our siblings. We can be angry at ourselves, and we can be angry at the person who's passed away. It doesn't make any sense. People might say, you shouldn't be, but it's all part of it. There's a feeling of shock or numbness that can happen. I literally was at Dad's funeral feeling like nothing happened. I didn't shed a tear. It was like nobody could say anything that would bother me. And it was like, okay. Oh, can I tell you a story, a little sideline about Dad's funeral? This is kind of cute. Dad was cremated, and we had just a very small service, maybe about, 40, 50 people came. And I had a nephew who was about 3 years old at the time, Jack. And after they buried the box of Dad's ashes in the ground, and each one of us 4 kids took a turn and put the scoop of the dirt on top of the box in the ground. And so when it came time for Jack to do it, this little tiny guy with blonde hair and blue eyes really struggled with this big shovel, and he finally got a scoop in there. Well, then it was over, and the gravedigger comes, and he starts putting more dirt in. And little Jack looks up, and he says, why does he get so many turns? I know, it's sweet. But anyways, I just thought of that, Dad's funeral. The feeling of disbelief, like, can't possibly be gone. It's not possible. Even sometimes thinking we see the deceased person, and we're still looking for them, or we expect the phone to ring. Can't sleep, or sleep too much. Can't eat, or eat too much. I had lost a tremendous amount of weight, kept it off about 4 years. Dad died, it all came back. Constant mind chatter. The mind does not shut down. Sometimes I call it the garbage truck because nothing good is being processed. Lots of thoughts over and over and over and over and over. Often feelings of guilt. Before Grammy died, the night before she died, I thought, oh, I should call Grammy, see how she's doing. I didn't. I lived with that for a long time. My dad was deaf in his right ear. He had a ton of medication in him just before he passed. And a friend of his called, and he says, just put the phone up to your dad's ear. Let me say goodbye to my best friend. I put it on the wrong ear. And for months, I'm thinking Dad never got it and how awful I was. To later remind myself that Dad heard it. Who am I kidding? We're so much more powerful than just these bodies. Bad memory, I mentioned earlier. poor concentration, no energy. We could have this fear of dying ourselves that comes out of grief. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my loved ones? Can put us in a real panic. Wanting to be alone. Man, I tell you what, I just didn't want to deal with anybody. I didn't want to be nice. I just wanted to retreat. And then the opposite would kick in. If someone came into my circle, I just wanted to tell the story over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and this is what my siblings did, and this is what happened, and this is dad, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And looking back at it now, that it's been a few years, that Sandra never existed before, and it has not existed after, and so clearly that's part of grief. Okay, so now we're going to get on to, did anybody have any questions so far? You happy to be here? I am thrilled that you're here, by the way, if I didn't say that enough. I mean, it's to take the time to come here for a couple of days, and for yourself and for what you're giving to others. I really thank you for that. And I want to make sure everybody knows a couple of things. Email's probably best, but Sandra@sandrachamplain.com, or I have a website called wedon'tdie.com, and that grief audio is there. I created an audio called Reconnections that is like a visual imagery that puts you in a place that you can reconnect with your deceased loved ones, and with a very quiet mind. And that's all free stuff. Just go to the website and find it. Okay, so ways to release some of the pain and build up these healthy brain chemicals. And if there's something I don't mention and you're sitting there going, well, this works too, let me know, okay? First of all, it was realizing what you're feeling is normal. What you resist persists. So the more times you feel guilty and realize you're feeling guilty, and hang on, cough's coming back. If you try to push away, say, a feeling, it'll only sneak back in. So take the time, whether it's anger, whether it's guilt, whether it's sadness, and be present and feel the emotion for it to go. Now, this does not mean if you're angry, you take it out on someone. It means you recognize, I'm in the anger stage here. Okay, all right, and just feel it, and it'll dissipate. Eating right and exercise and sunshine and things like that will get your physical sense well again. I mean, we know about the endorphins that are released when we exercise and we have sunshine and things like that. Any activity you can do to get your mind off the grief and off the pain and onto something else will allow a space for healing to occur. Faith, being involved in religion. You may or may not be a religious person, but many of us are, or we have been somewhere in our day. And just to find out what our church believes in life after death and grief, and to be part of a community. Yeah, I know we might be pulling to really be alone in something, but to be embraced by a community that believes is great. Myself and some people that I know personally have taken our grief and turned it into making a difference for another. I know Mothers Against Drunk Driving obviously came about with the woman who lost her child. Myself, I know I am the author of We Don't Die, but secretly it's undercover for how do I get this grief information out to everybody? And certainly, yes, I want to provide good information about life after death. And certainly, yes, the book is also a motivational book because I want to empower people to live a good life now. But don't be fooled. That How to Survive Grief audio is chapter 10 of my book. I'm going to give it to people whether they want it or not. So see what maybe fuels you out of your grief. Look as grief could be a gift. And when you're in the trenches of grief and you feel horrible, that's the last thing you want to look at. But my friend Angie, who is now one of my dearest friends, has one of the largest Facebook groups going on grief. She's got over 1 million people that are sharing her words. And it is Grief the Unspoken is her Facebook group. And she and I also started something called We Care Grief Support, a kind of a membership site to help people with grief. But Angie had to live through some tremendous loss. And to hear her story and to know what she's been through and using that to, I mean, if you go to her Facebook group and you see what's going on and how to have a community of like-minded people that are all experiencing the same thing is so important, as opposed to being alone in your grief, surrounded by people that have never felt it before. Big difference. Talking to someone. And this means sharing your grief, picking up the phone, calling someone. Yes, if you need to repeat your story 800 times like I did, then that's okay. But don't be alone in it. If you're not one who's going to do that no matter what, pull out a journal. When you can start taking the thoughts out of your mind and putting them on paper, it's very interesting. A couple things happen is, one, you stop thinking the same thoughts. And it might take a while, but there's some phenomena that happens that once it's out of your head and onto paper, it's like released. And through journaling, there's been some great people that have had ideas, inventions, poetry's been written, new thoughts have come out of it. So journal could help in a couple of ways. Important to cry, like I said, and experience the emotions. Having compassion with yourself or with others. I mean, just remember, grieving person is very much like somebody coming down from a chemical dependency. Be compassionate. Create a memorial of some sort. When you can give your attention, whether it was like me writing my book and writing the audio, or creating a project, or you could create, I know people that have done like a memorial walk in honor of a person and raised money. I know people that have planted trees in honor of their loved one. I found online a website where you can actually create a memorial site. So my dad's name is John Champlain. So I made johnchamplain.com, and he had, gosh, Dad was incredible, but he had about 300 people at his funeral, and he had a ton more that couldn't come. So it provided a place where they could come and leave their respects, and even put a picture if they wanted. And for me, to channel my energy there was so much healthier than me stewing in the pain. And again, it's not just Dad's death, because remember, I had that all going on with my siblings as well. Animals and children are a godsend, because if you got a little one running around there, makes a difference. Just days before my dad died, I had gotten together with a friend of mine, and she brought me into this puppy store. And it was one of these mom and pop stores, and all the puppies were in little cages. And then they encouraged, pick up a puppy and play. And as down as I felt, it is really hard to be stewing in grief when you got this cute little thing licking your face. So that helped a lot. Music's great, reading a book, going to a movie, something, and I'm repeating myself, I know, but something to distract your mind from the grief and onto something else starts helping build these healthy chemicals. Gratefulness exercise. If you take a pen and paper and you literally have to write 50 things you're grateful for, because in the beginning you're not going to find much, but when we start to actually think of what we're grateful for and feel it, and it can be little things you start off with. I'm glad I have a chair to sit in, that I'm not sitting on the floor. Well, I'm glad I actually have a house, because there's some people without houses. Well, oh, that sounded funny. Instead of without houses, it sounded like with an outhouse. I'm sorry. Like, what did I say? But being grateful for what you have, again, yes, you've got a big, huge hole in your heart, but it'll help you heal. My grief audio, I still have that website, survivegrief.com. You can just go there and press the play button. And believe it or not, when you're grieving, and like I said, the memory is not so great, you can hear things today and they might help you. And then 3 days from now, if you listen to it again, you'll think, I didn't hear that the first time. So sometimes just that gentle reminder of where you are is normal, that makes a difference. Let's see. Believe in life after death. That's huge. To really believe that your loved one is here right now. You can't see them. And one of my favorite things to talk about is things do not have to be visible for them to be real. Nobody knows really how the GPS signal works. And there's no wires connecting that satellite to your car, yet it's talking and it's telling us where to go. Or around us is the wireless internet. We can't see it. There's radio waves bouncing around. There's a whole invisible world. Yes, in my book, but also on my website, wedon'tdie.com, I really do pour it out as far as I can to help people believe that their loved ones are still around. And to know it, to feel it, can really help. And it could even be having a cup of coffee at your kitchen table, one for you and a cup for your loved one, and just imagining and trusting that they're sitting there even though you can't see them, and still continue to have a dialogue. And like I said, my Reconnections audio, if you go to wedon'tdie.com, click on Reconnections. Be in a quiet place where no interruptions, and it really is, it's 20 minutes of quieting your mind and to being allowed to, like allowing a space for them to show up. You have to experience it because it's too much to give you in just a few minutes left here. There's something I call the present moment technique. And what I always say is the access, I guess, to miracles, to peace. We've heard of meditation and quieting the mind. I mean, part of being human is having this little, I call it the voice, the mind that nonstop is talking to us, always, saying I'm good, I'm bad, I'm not good enough, causing fear, causing panic, causing guilt, all these things. And when we're grieving, that voice not only is turned up louder, but it talks even more. Sometimes it wakes us up in the middle of the night. And to be able to quiet that voice, even for a little while, and it might not be too long, it might be a few seconds, but that will provide extraordinary relief and just, again, start these chemicals to start building again. Things that will help is we have our 5 senses. And so depends on where you are, what you're doing, but right now in front of this podium, if I were grieving or not, just wanted to quiet my mind, if I take my time and really look at every intricate detail and concentrate on the feel under my hands and what wood feels like, and if I give all my attention to that, I'm not thinking about whatever else it is. And like I said, sometimes it's only for a few minutes, or not even minutes, seconds, that you can be in a present moment. But what a difference if you're having a meal instead of being in front of the TV and thinking about what's been going on and over and over and over. Take the time and just savor it. John Kabat-Zinn is a doctor, and one of the things he practices is this mindfulness technique for pain release. Because whether it's a physical pain, which many of his patients are the physical pain, or if it's a mental pain, we really can only pay attention to something, one thing at a time. I mean, it's impossible for us to be paying attention to 2 things at the exact same time. It just doesn't work. So even for a moment, and what he does is he has people take a box of grapes, or raisins, and explore the raisin, look at the raisin, feel the raisin, and then, very slowly you taste the raisin, and the whole world of the raisin. Well, he has so many patients that even just for a few seconds to release the pain is huge. So that's the present moment technique. And all of this, of course, takes practice, because your mind will want to keep chatting. It will. Join a support group. There are local support groups, there are church support groups, there are online support groups. I list a lot of support groups on my We Don't Die website. And Angie and I have also created the We Care Grief Support website. And if anybody is interested in that, this is not a pitch to sell you anything, but this is just an FYI. What we're doing is we're charging $97 for a lifetime membership, and it includes a copy of the CD that you've gotten, my book, and a copy of the DVD. There's a We Don't Die documentary now on wedon'tdie.com, so you get a hard copy of that. And it's a closed community of people. There's a grief release course that Angie has created, which is amazing, that people can work through their grief. There's a bunch of tools and exercises to help with grief. Lots of information about how grief works. A grief forum where people can participate, and it's probably one of the only places that people can get in touch with us and ask their questions and be able to be cared about. And of course, it is 100% money-back guarantee. If it's something you're not interested in, no problem. Or if you're interested in it and you want to check it out, I'd be happy to give you a week subscription and just look at it. You know, that's completely up to you. Just come see me at the break. A little something about this anticipatory grief. We are all terminal, right? We live life like we're not. But in the case of my dad having not much time left, it's like, well, what do you do? And how do you deal with that? And even if you're the person who's in those shoes, and again, like, we really are all terminal. We have no idea what the future holds tomorrow. But how to live life at the best quality right now. A couple things we did is I would bring in my computer and I would watch movies with Dad. And then we'd talk about it. We'd have really great discussions. We played something called the gratitude game. Dad was in tremendous suffering and pain because of his cancer, and he loved people. So every nurse, every doctor that walked in, we had this little secret game, like, what are we going to say or do so that that person would leave the room happier than when they walked in. It was such a brilliant distraction from, like, what was really going on. We would play the gratitude game. And, like, where I was making this stuff up, I don't know, but I felt like a cruise director. I gave my time completely to my dad just to make his journey the best it could be. We'd go back and forth. What are you grateful for? And he'd say something, and I'm like, well, this is what I'm grateful for. And before long, we would just start laughing. And you know how, there's a couple things. Yes, it helps the grief, but again, it also floods the body with these feel-good endorphins. Really important. Visual imagery. My dad was at a state where he had a pain pump in him. He couldn't move around a lot. When he could get up, which was very rare at the end, he had what they called a turtle shell around him because part of his back had been broken apart with a tumor. Miserable, right? And so what you need to know about my dad is 1 year prior to even being in his early 70s, he rode 20 miles a day. Peak of fitness, active. And so it was very hard for him to be in this way. So one of the things that I did is I found out some of his favorite memories. And so I would have him close his eyes and just imagine himself. He had ridden his bicycle across the United States to raise money for, I don't know if you know Dr. Bernie Siegel. He's wonderful. He wrote the foreword to my book. He's a wonderful man. But Dad had cancer 30 years earlier, and he had gone into remission, and really thank Bernie Siegel for making that difference in his mind and in his body. So Dad went on this bike ride and raised a ton of money for Dr. Bernie. I think he did it 4 or 5 times. But I would take Dad on these visual imagery journeys, whether it was riding his bicycle across country or deep sea fishing in Cabo San Lucas. And Dad had his eyes closed. And of course, he had all these things pinned into him and stuff like that. But I just saw him, one of the times I was talking about fishing, it's just like, just remember what the water looked like, and the line was out, and we were trolling, and there's one on the line, and gotta reel it in. So my dad, with his eyes closed, had this smile on his face, and his hands went up, and he starts doing this, like he's reeling in the fish. And in that moment, I know that pain was not present for Dad, and what was present was Cabo San Lucas. Death of the body is simply closing of our eyes here and opening them in a new place. It is not to be feared, although even though I've written the book and even though I'm in front of you right now, no, do I want to think like that's my next step? I don't. We as human beings all do have this voice inside of our head that it keeps us believing that we are just this. We are just our bodies, and what we see is real. When we can quiet our minds and we can get to that place of nothingness and in the present moment, like a whole new reality shows up. Do you remember the nursery rhyme, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream? Well, if you take those words literally and you think, what do they mean? Well, your body could be your boat, and instead of trying what most of us do is to row upstream against the current, fighting the whole time, if we could be living that all is well, we might not have the answers to our suffering or why things are going the way they are. But if we can be living that life is an experience for the soul, that when our bodies die, we really don't. When you close your eyes for that last time here and you open them again, you're going to be surrounded. My dad's going to be there. Your kids are going to be there if you've lost them. Your animals, Grammy. This great place is going to be there. A cute story. My dad, extremely religious, went to church every day. Every day. And even before he passed, he's like, Sandra, what else can I do even from this hospital bed to be by Jesus' side and do Jesus' work? So Dad passed away, and I went to a seminar, and I got paired with a roommate, someone I didn't know, and her name was Jill, and she was I don't know if she was a social worker or something like that. And she says, I don't tell too many people this, but I get these psychic hits. She says, I've got a real strong feeling that your dad's deceased. I says, yeah? And she says, he's a tall man? Yeah. She says, is his name John? I said, yes. And she says, he really wants you to know that he's with you and that he's by Jesus' side. It's amazing. So row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So it's been said by enough people that have had these near-death experiences and have crossed over for those few moments that where we go is so much more real than what we're experiencing right now. And the only way I can imagine that is, if you dream at night, and some of those dreams we have seem so real, don't they? And then you wake up and it's like, oh, wow, that was just a dream. Well, to have that experience of closing our eyes and then opening them into, whether you call it the heaven or the hereafter, and be greeted by your loved ones and really get that life that was a dream. So I love that nursery rhyme. We have 5 minutes left, so let me see. I love this. This Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, brilliant book. He has a quote. The late Mrs. Thomas Edison told me that when her husband was dying, he whispered to his physician, "It is very beautiful over there." Edison was a scientist with a factual cast of mind. He never reported anything as fact until he saw it and it worked. He would have never reported it is very beautiful over there unless, having seen, he knew it to be true. I have a friend who's a minister, and his dad was in a coma, didn't have long to live. He was a couple months in the coma. And he said he was sitting with his dad, and all of a sudden, Dad's eyes opened, looks around, he swings out of bed, just on the corner of the bed, and he's smiling. And my friend Steve says, "Dad, what are you seeing?" Same thing. It's really beautiful there. And Steve says, "Well, who do you see?" And he started naming people. And the interesting thing is he named people that were deceased, but they had just recently died while he was in the coma, and he was never told that they were dead. And he saw them. And he said, Steve said, well, what are you going to do? He says, well, I'd like to wear a suit because I'm hearing, I think from Jesus, that I don't have much time left. I'd like to get dressed up as a suit. I'd like all you kids here, I'd like to watch a football game. I'd like to get a hot fudge sundae and a cherry pie and enjoy this body while I have it. And so he ended up passing away on, I think it was New Year's Eve. And my friend Steve knew without a doubt that his dad was just crossing over to this next place. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, I have a friend who's a heart surgeon, and he said that human beings typically have 3 things that happen before they go under anesthesia before having heart surgery, because we're afraid of our mortality then. 1 is we have regrets. 2 is we think of the things that are left unsaid to our family. And 3, whether you call yourself an atheist or not, everybody, he says, starts praying to God. We all want to believe. So what if instead of waiting for that time that we're told, or whatever it is, no matter how much time we have, that we really embrace life, that we walk out these doors today, being more in the present moment, when we're with someone face to face, that we really share our love, we listen, present to all the richness. When we eat, we really taste. When we go outside, we really see. When we hear music, we really hear it. And when we touch or feel a hug, we are 100% in the moment. Be a great life. That's my real message, is I want people to, I say, play full out and get your money's worth out of life while we're here on planet Earth. So, in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, taking the time, and know, again, my email is sandra@sandrachamplain.com. And anything I can do to be of assistance now or in the future, I'm here for you. And if you're one of those people that have a secret dream of writing a book, I now have all the access and all the people, so I can help you turn your dreams into reality. So thank you.